and welcome to Stephen University. It's the one after the big one, aka Now We're Only Falling Apart, aka Minute to Breathe and Consider What We've Learned.
I'm glad we'll get to it in the recap, but I'm really glad that they just went, people are going to probably want to know the story here. Let's just give it to them.
Yeah, 100%. It's the absolute right thing to do, 100%.
And a really clever way of doing it.
I was just about exactly this. You just took the words straight out my mouth. Like, if I was thinking of the perfect way to do this, this is the way to do it. For sure.
Yeah.
But for those who somehow have forgotten this episode that aired less than 12 days ago, catch them up, Chris.
Well, basically, it starts where we left off. Garnet and Amethyst are in shock at the revelation. So Pearl kind of apologizes. Amethyst is rather comically like, man, if you told me Rose invented candy floss at this point, I'd believe it. But Garnet is really shaken up and divides into Ruby and Sapphire. Sapphire pointing out that, she's not meant to. Ruby's not meant to see it, but she is. So then she runs off. Pearl and Stephen go after her. Pearl and Stephen find Sapphire. She's doing her Elsa impression. Everything's icy. Everything's covered up in her anger. So Pearl begins to actually tell the story. She was given to Pink Diamond. Pink Diamond had the Earth colony, but no matter what they did, she was bored by it and wasn't happy. So Pearl points out that the quartz are about to come out, so they go down to the kindergarten with Rose disguised as a quartz. She then tries to stop the war. She tries to, and then they confirm that the Diamonds built the zoo to protect the life, but it's still not good enough. So she decides to form Rose Quartz to start a rebellion and become a symbol to stop them. Deciding to just basically get rid of the gems altogether on Earth until she meets Garnet and realizes that Earth can be a place for gems that society has let go of. So she begins fighting for Garnet. And it's fascinating, really. I thought it was a really great episode. You sort of, by the end of the episode, you're like, oh, Heart of the Crystal Gems is, maybe that's referring to Garnet. Like, Garnet's the one that's sort of kept them together. And there's also, it deals with really powerful themes. There's a great, I don't know the exact quote, but she says something like, of course she's a gem. Everyone got destroyed and corrupted. Of course she's a diamond. I'm surprised she just took the long road to making us feel all this pain or something like that.
I've got the line
brilliant.
up here. Making me believe in a better future I couldn't see because it wasn't real. And now here we are, our friends shattered, corrupted. Of course she was a diamond. What a long road she took to torture us all like this.
Ugh, beautiful. And like I say, the format of... Because you could have just done... I'd have been happy with just a flashback episode, just telling the story. But to get a flashback episode in the context of a character piece about Garnet and Sapphire and Ruby and Sapphire is just genius writing. Because it sets up the bomb. It feels like a bomb, which is great and important and rare. Loved it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's one of the better ones. 1 second, I'm going to... Nadia's just come in. Hello, Nadia. You can shut the door if you want to take the things off.
What does Nadia think of it, Dan?
What did Nadia think of it? Nadia, what did you think of Now We're Only Falling Apart? The episode where they, after discovering the truth about Pink Diamond, Garnet splits up and they retell the story. Thoughts?
Hang on, because I'm not sure if I'm thinking of the episode afterwards.
You might be thinking of the episode afterwards.
Yeah.
It's where they tell Sapphire the story of Rose Quartz and how it's not the one you're thinking of. No.
That's fine as an episode.
That's fine as an episode, is Nadia's review.
Wow. There you go, guys. I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Andrew. Chris is ending the podcast now on that note. Super. Right.
It's fine as an episode.
Yeah, I think it's because I think...
what happens in the next episode?
Well, here's the thing. It's. I always find it interesting. Nadia always looks for different things in the show than I do, and I think she's mostly it's not fair to say she's mostly after the yucks, but the stuff that tends to stick with her tends to be like the sort of more iconically funny scenes. It's why Peridot's one of her favorite characters. Like it's and there's stuff coming up that's like a little playful. That she sticks in Nadia's memory more than sort of the more dramatic stuff we think of when we watch an episode like this.
Okay. So, that makes sense. I think this is a one as well that, like I say, it's a bit like Letters to Mars. Letters to Lars. The biggest compliment is the way they chose to tell the story and how they chose to do it. Mm-hmm. And you feel their pain, and this feels like the beginning of a really great tight bond bomb that's gonna explore some of this stuff, and really look into the fallout of it. Which it's hard because it's hard to know what to say when the reality is that's all we could have ever hoped for.
Yeah, I mean it's a wonderful episode because, as you point out, it's one thing to say, well, we're going to tell that story because that's what we need to do now because we just dropped this huge bomb on people, so let's address that immediately. We can't there's no way the characters wouldn't want the full story now. We know that. Like, we got that snippet of the key information that makes the whole story just turn on its head. You need to now correct it and adjust it to make it all fit and make sense and fill in those last few holes. So there was no question what this episode had to do. But as you've pointed out, the cleverness of linking that into a character piece and essentially causing Garnet to separate. And I loved the character element of, if you'd have described this episode to me without specifying what happened, like who says what, I'd have probably assumed Ruby was the angry one. Ruby's always quick to anger and fire, and it's usually Sapphire that's calm and collected. The idea that Sapphire is the one that's most upset by this makes perfect sense in the context of the episode, but I wouldn't have called it. Does that make sense? Because
definitely.
And I think it strengthens the episode because it's such unexpected behavior from these characters. Ruby is being the most rational, which is nuts. Ruby's like, let's stay and talk about this. Let's just talk. You know what I mean? And that's crazy because Ruby is the hot-headed one. Notion. Like, it's so interesting that this has forced them to switch roles.
That notion, though, of one of the reasons Sapphire's being upset is because she didn't see it. She didn't know. She didn't foresee the truth. And she feels that's awesome. And
she feels like she should have done. And in the process of explaining that, she's almost being disparaging to Ruby. She's like, you never know what's going on.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm for. And it's part of truth. It's like, you couldn't have known. I'm not being insulting. That's fact. But to then add you never know what's going on. It's quite a demeaning thing to say, whether factually accurate or not. So for me, that moment is really powerful for a couple of reasons, because it sets up a very new dynamic for Ruby and Sapphire. First of all, a role reversal of sorts, but totally fits in the moment. It makes sense to me that the shock of learning this would make Ruby suddenly be like, "Whoa, okay, we need to talk about this." And it also I totally believe that it would make Sapphire turn into a little ball of fire and run off in anger and be furious at Rose, and also, of course, they reacted that way. Their entire relationship was based on Rose making them believe in an ideal. And she was a diamond. She was lying. For all Sapphire and Ruby know, Rose didn't really even fully believe that ideal. Because at that point, Sapphire knows nothing. She just knows that she was really a diamond, and was she just toying with us?
Was it all part of some sort of master plan that actually had negative means? What I also love about the Sapphire plot is it's one of those, and I've complimented the show on doing this before, it's one of those plots that they do, and you go, oh, of course this is the story. Sapphire's annoyed she couldn't see what was happening. Of course, that's the story, but you don't.
Well, she must feel so betrayed.
You still wouldn't come up with it.
Also,
I wouldn't think. I didn't predict this story, but it makes such sense.
No, and I will say as well, it's also like for Sapphire, a character that can literally never be betrayed. Can theoretically never be betrayed, because she would likely always see that as at least being a possibility. So even if she is betrayed, she would always been a little bit prepared for it, because she can always see the probability of being like, that's likely to happen, or that's a probable future. Do you know what I mean? So she could never really be surprised by betrayal. And if she feels betrayed in that moment, because so much of what she's built her life on feels like the whim of a lunatic, the whim of a despot, the whim of the very force they were fighting, before she hears the full story, it makes so much sense that she would be so absurdly angry, because that will have never happened to her before. Do you know what I mean? So it's really artfully done, very, very convincing, and makes a lot of sense for the character.
That's the Sapphire character stuff then. Awesome, amazing work. What did you think to the Rose story? What did you think? Because I was like, well, this all makes complete sense. It's kind of what we knew happened anyway, but I think it's believable, it's buyable, and you can see how she ended up in the situation she ended up in.
Yeah, they contextualize it really well. I again, credit to the writers, because obviously the only way they can do that is if the plan was functional from the beginning. Because if you come up with a twist and then have to retrofit it, then you get inconsistencies and problems. But because this plan has obviously been there since day one, and it didn't need to be retrofitted in any way, it was kind of perfect, because all they needed to do was just contextualize Rose's decisions to make her less potentially dubious as a character. Because when you hear she's really Pink Diamond and you realise she accidentally started, well, not accidentally, but fucking started a war, got everyone killed, you think, well, what kind of person does that? Like, what's happening? When you realise how little of the situation was really in her control, she's this... She's somebody who's been brought up in this gem society with a caste system. She is clearly, as demonstrated in this episode, for some reason, lower class than the other two diamonds we've met. And she's given this colony that she's begged for, because her whole life she was told that's what she was destined to do. You're a diamond, you'll run things eventually. They finally gave her a colony, even though they weren't sure she was ready. And lo and behold, she proves that pretty instantly, because once she gets on Earth, she sees the people and all that stuff, and watching her learn to cherish life, and that be the reason she initially chose to be. She didn't become Rose Quartz to sort of start a war. She became Rose Quartz to explore the Earth, and then fell in love with it, and then turned Rose Quartz into the leader of a rebellion once the diamonds wouldn't let her, as Pink Diamond, end that colony. And when
she tried. She tried to do it the right way.
And that's what's really important, because when you contextualize it that way, you actually keep the core of the character. The character isn't betraying the beliefs we've always understood about Rose, that she came to Earth, fell for sort of the planet and the life on it, and then decided to protect it, right? That's a big part of the story of Rose. When you hear she's also Pink Diamond, you go, well, okay, now do I have to rethink that? Like, what are her motives? Where was she coming from in all this? Well, actually, the exact same place. And it's important that they immediately contextualize that and give us that fact and say, look, this is where Rose was coming from. She was in a position of wanting to immediately sort of do the right thing, because as soon as she stepped foot on Earth, she was, appreciating how incredible it is, and then tried for, it seems like, a long time to end it in a more peaceful manner. And when that failed, that's when she became Rose Quartz. And then there's the Rose Quartz, the leader of the rebellion, not just a Rose Quartz. And then there's the other element of it as well, which is the even more beautiful twist to this tale that I could never have possibly imagined, which is that she started that rebellion herself to scare off every gem. Gems were bad for her for a bit, because they were the cause of the suffering on that planet. They were going to be the cause of that planet's doom. So all gems were essentially bad. And then she met Garnet. And the idea that it would suddenly hit her that gems are as trapped and as forced into their roles as she was as a diamond, that everyone should have the option to turn their back on that if they so choose. Everyone should be free enough to want to defend something they believe in, because that's what she chose to do. Because she wasn't free enough to do that as Pink Diamond. She had to become Rose Quartz to do that. And seeing Garnet being the catalyst for her, not only turning Earth into a sort of sanctuary for the life on it, but actually for any gems that didn't want to be part of the Homeworld's caste system, is beautiful. And it all...
Of course, because that's...
Go on, sorry.
That's an element of Garnet that we've never spoken about, because until this point, until this episode, I don't think it's been as clear to me, at least. Not only is Garnet a fusion, and fusions are bad, etc., but maybe the reason fusions are bad is because gems are created to do a job, and by fusing, the Sapphire and the Ruby are not doing those jobs. They're not doing what they were supposed to do. They don't, fit into society. I suppose we have talked about that. We talked a huge amount.
Back it was a long time ago now. It was like nearly 100 episodes ago. But like around episode 50, when we first learned of the fusion of Garnet, Jasper acted as if they were a disgusting creation. Jasper had a lot of disdain for what Garnet was, and the initial assumption you make is that fusions are maybe frowned upon, permanent fusions are what's frowned upon. And then as the series goes on, you realise the actual issue isn't fusion. Fusion is actually quite common on Homeworld. It's fusion of two different gems. And that's what upsets the people of Homeworld. And then especially when you see The Answer, which is the episode this is obviously heavily tied into, because this episode literally crosses over into The Answer. Because in The Answer, we saw Rose coming across Garnet. This time we see it from Rose's perspective, and it's a very different... Well, not a very different story, but there's a whole new angle to that story that we didn't realise. Garnet meant as much to Rose as Rose meant to Garnet, and that's nuts. I would have never... I couldn't see how important they were to each other until this episode aired, and that's crazy good writing.
I just love it, though, because... The reason is it goes against what gem society sees as societal norms. Like, it's links to sexuality, it's links to race, this shows links to anyone that has been afraid for any reason to feel different, even though they're not different. This show is so important for that kind of topic. It's so fitted to this idea that it doesn't matter how you look, what your sexuality is. Nothing matters. We're all one, and we should all be free to be whoever we want to be, or be whoever we want to be with. It's incredible.
And you could make Rose the hero again by making her fight for those ideals at the cost of everything.
Yeah.
Massive risk to herself, to the planet, to those she draws into her war. But ultimately, it was for the right reasons. It was done in order for Rose to protect that message. So you go from feeling Rose is a dubious force to feeling that Rose is on the absolute most important, is fighting for one of the most important ideals that we on Earth should be fighting for right now. And that instantly and very cleverly turns her from a slightly more questionable character, when you hear that she was also Pink Diamond, into a very, very heroic figure, which is remarkable to do that in the space of switching between two episodes.
But the writing of this show, I completely agree with everything you just said, by the way, but because it feels like I'm going back to the point I was just making, but that's because I'm just so appreciative and so astounded by the writing of this show, because it doesn't hit you over the head with any of that.
No.
But it is all there, and the message is clear, and the message for children is clear, and that is a wonderful thing. That is an amazing, unpatronising thing.
Well, it's
the message of inclusivity that this show has.
Well, it's incredible that it's come back up for the the multiple times now, because through Garnet has very much symbolised that element of it. The way she and the off colours have been sort of cast out from Gem Society. The off colours are a similar situation, obviously. They also represent that same message very clearly, especially. Well, no, all of them. They're all for different reasons. Because what I love about the off-colours, actually, is it's not just about being different in a specific way. There's not one specific way you can be different where Gem Society will cast you out. The off-colours are all different in different ways. They're not just different in that same exact way Garnet is. Does that make sense? So, you've got a fusion of not just definitely. Two, like dozens of gems, and then you've got sort of the Rutile twins, who are sort of like... sort of they're this sort of double gem, and then you've got Padparacha, who's a very rare kind of red sapphire whose powers don't work the same way as sapphires do. Like, they're all different for different reasons, and I think and like Road Knight, who is, I suppose, is the same as Garnet in terms of what separates Road Knight from sort of the sort of normal, in quote marks, gems of Homeworld. But like between the two of them, like that message has been so thick and fast through the show. But it's amazing how, even though it's present so often, when an episode like this hits that reinforces it so strongly, it can feel like, oh, that's what they were talking about all along, even though that is what we've been talking about all along. It can make the whole idea seem fresh and new again, which is nuts, because it's been there since we established Garnet, really.
Yeah, and you want to punch the air in triumph, and you want to... It's so... And, like, I get it, because... That was me, but any time I say to Jess, she references the show, and I'm like, oh well, when you're watching it, you'll know what I mean. And she's like, I have no intention of watching it, and I'm like, but you should. And she's like, no, I don't fancy watching it. I watched the first episode; it was too kiddish. It's a cartoon. Nah, I'm not into it. And I'm like, but it's one of the most intelligently and beautifully written shows I've ever seen.
No.
And she just laughs. And she's like, it can't be. Like, and I get it. I was there. Like, I absolutely get that.
Let her listen to the first episode of this show and see how you started. And let her understand the journey that even you've taken it through this. Because, like, the derision you felt towards it. Or not derision. Derision's the wrong word. I think there was a certain element of you trusted my judgment. Because we've always had such similar taste. And we do disagree occasionally. But, like, on the whole... Usually we like roughly the same stuff. I think that's worked for us really, because if we were massively different in our tastes, the Nothing But Static TV podcast we do, that's our sort of main podcast, would be nowhere near as fun to listen to.
I think people assume that's going to be more fun, but actually, debate. We could probably do 10 great episodes on debating and disagreeing, but we've managed to do 120 moderately okay episodes of discussion, and what do people want in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, analysis is better than is more valuable, I think, than debate. And I think when we are roughly in line on, that's the good thing actually. We're roughly in line on most things, but then occasionally there's that beautiful thing where we both happen to think very oppositely about a show, and then we do get that as well. So I think the balance we have between sort of like debate and analysis on our main TV podcast is that. But I think that's really what I think that works really well in terms of this show though, and its depths and like that Jess situation. I think with the difference between the it shouldn't be the difference. I don't know, because I mean, how do you feel your taste compares to Jess's? Because I think, other than forcing you to do it through creating a whole podcast in order for you to watch the show, I think that there's a part of you that went, well, I've more often than not been in line with Dan's taste. He really loves this thing. There's got to be a chance that I'm going to enjoy this, so it's worth a shot.
Yes, but I don't know if I'd have got as deep. Like, if we weren't doing the podcast,
that's the problem,
I don't know,
isn't it?
Because
it's that hump,
because you're right. You were right about Avatar, and I watched an entire season of that and then stopped. You were right about BoJack Horseman, but I didn't continue that either. And that's not just an animated show thing. I'm convinced if I had the time to dedicate to it, I'd love to, like, honestly, if someone was like garden leave, I've had some friends I had a friend who had 3 months worth of garden leave, which for those who aren't familiar, it's usually applied to people in sales role, so it would never happen to Dan or I. But if you're in a sales role and you are going to a competitor company, in order to stop you taking your current clients with you, businesses put you on garden leave, which means you can't work at all for 3 months or a month, whatever the period is. So it's paid, it's paid for by the old company, and they go, right, you're out the door, just leave. We'll pay you for 3 months, but you can't actually work, because it gives them, in theory, 3 months to network with your contacts and try and keep them. And I got a mate that was on garden leave for 3 months, and he was like, oh, I'm so bored. Let me tell you, if they were like, right, you're on garden leave for 3 months, I'd be like, right, give me that 24 box set, right? Okay, cool. Like, sometimes it's a time thing.
Give me BoJack Horseman.
Yeah, but but seriously, like,
BoJack's
you
great.
just
BoJack's done.
yeah. So I think it's a time thing. I think it's there's 150 episodes. Yes, they're only 11 minutes long, but so I think doing it in the podcast form helped. But yeah, I think this episode absolutely highlights all the incredible things about the show. But you can't. But all of that only exists if you've seen it all and you have all of that context.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Because what's beautiful about this episode is seeing, like, I think the key thing about this episode that is like the core message that I take away from this episode is that Garnet represented something incredibly important to Rose and a revelation for Rose. Because, and we've not even gotten to the Pearl side of this story yet, by the way, which we've still got to discuss, but Garnet was the thing that made Rose realize that it wasn't just about saving Earth. It was about ideals that Homeworld didn't hold that maybe they should, and about giving the gems that feel that way but are too afraid to say it or do anything about it a voice to rally around. You're not alone. She was the first to rebel, but there were clearly many, many gems out there that agreed with her, but were too afraid to say anything or do anything. Then she did it, and then others followed. There's a reason she developed a whole sort of mini army. It didn't happen by accident. They obviously already felt that way. She didn't, like, she may have convinced them to a certain degree, but it has to be based in something you already think and agree with. Do you know what I mean? You can't take someone who is 100% believes one thing and flip their opinion like that. It's just not how it works. You know what I mean? They've got to already have some doubts for you to be able to go in and talk them round. Do you know what I mean? It's got to be within their sort of thought pattern. And I think she gave voice to that, but she only started doing that because she discovered Garnet. So without Garnet, none of this happens. Like, it's you know what I mean? It's incredible. It's so, the ultimate gay rights activist only discovered gay rights when she first met a gay person. That's the equivalent. If we're doing the real world facsimile idea, it is like that. It's like she fought for this so hard for so much of her life and was willing to give her life for it because she can't possibly have fictionally shattered Pink Diamond without thinking she was in the firing line for doing that. All for the rights of these people who are ostracized. You know what I mean? So it is like a person sort of like, meeting someone who's different, realizing that person is ostracized, and then like fighting for it, even though it doesn't really include them. She could have, at any point, she could have become Pink Diamond again, gone back to her old life, left it, let it die. She didn't. She kept fighting at the cost of everything. At the cost of everything. And what kicked that off was Garnet. And that's beautiful. So, because what kicked Garnet off, in terms of her fighting for her own ability to be who she wants to be and not being afraid of being who she wants to be, was Rose. It's incredible. It's so good. It's beautiful. Really, it's really well written. That's incredible.
So, what do you think of the Pearl of it all? What I loved about the Pearl is you can totally see how she fell for Rose, because if you watch this episode in isolation without all the other background, you'd assume they were setting up a Rose and Pearl couple storyline, especially the accidental fusion and their reaction after it. Like it I believe they're about to become a couple, so I'm not surprised she didn't. She did.
Well,
Sorry.
I mean, that's the only element of this episode that's like questionable about Rose, because was Rose just that dim? Did she just not understand that she was sort of leading on Pearl, or I feel a bit conflicted about that, because
I think that there's an element of Pearl was given to Rose to serve her, and Rose saw her serving her and was almost annoyed by it before she went to Earth. You know, there's the bit where Pearl goes, I can, if you want me to imagine it, I can. And Rose sort of rolls her eyes at how subservient she is. But then the how subservient she is begins to benefit her, and she kind of returns that warmth. I don't think there's any way Rose was naive about it, but I think Rose didn't. Maybe that is the one area where Diamond Society, Gems, and I've not really thought this point through, so feel free to disagree below. And hey, I suppose technically you might get a response from me instead of Dan.
Well, I was going to set up at the end of this episode is I think when we get to the final episode of this bomb, I think what I'm going to do is set it up that for at least the final episode of this bomb, when it goes up, we're gonna. I suppose you could do the whole week, couldn't you? Because by the time these are going out, you'll be caught up.
Yeah, I'd be caught up. So comment below to see if I respond. I'll probably respond as nothing but static.
You'd have to.
I just have to.
Yeah, so you can log into the YouTube account. So we'll have Chris responding to these episodes. So comment below if you have anything you want to directly ask Chris. That's such a great idea.
So if you disagree with this, I've not thought it through. But maybe that's the one. Maybe theory that's the one area where of the Diamond culture that was so ingrained in her that she couldn't see past it. So for her, Pearl is being like that. Not necessarily is being like that out of love, but it's a love because she's a Pearl. So of course she feels that way, and of course she does that. And how kind of interesting is that notion that this great leader for difference and fighting against Diamond culture, so much so that she gave up her own, status as a Diamond. Still couldn't quite see past this one element of it because it was so ingrained. How tragic is that for her and Pearl in a way?
Yeah, and I think it's really, again, getting new context to old information. We always knew Rose landed on Earth and fell in love with the people and the planet. We had no idea that Pearl was the one who encouraged that. Pearl was the one who... Pearl was absolutely instrumental to showing Rose, unintentionally. Pearl didn't do that thinking, isn't this world great? She's going to love it and it's going to change everything. Pearl was just doing what she thought Rose wanted, or sorry, Pink wanted, I suppose. But she inadvertently gave her exactly what she needed to the point where, she forced this change on her. Because if she hadn't been so eager to encourage her to visit the planet itself, if she hadn't been so eager to show her the rest of the planet to keep her happy, and she just kept leading her to things that would make her happy, and that leading her to more and more things that would make her happy eventually made her realize how she felt about that planet. So in a weird way, without Pearl, none of this happens.
Yeah, it's so... so much of this episode, man, is poetry. But you know what's amazing is it feels like it's poetry from the design of planning this all along. Like it's not that in a way this episode benefits from the poetry of forward planning for this twist.
I mean, yeah, because so much of this would be so hard to fit together if the twist came later. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, if you hadn't thought it through. So what triv you got, Dan?
Triv. Before we get to triv, there's just a few of the little details in the episode I'd like to talk about, if that's okay.
No, I want the triv.
No, so you have to wait. Be patient. I found it interesting that Sapphire chose to go to Rose's fountain, considering that she was angry at Rose.
Loved the use of that when she was calming down and the ice was defrosting, and it made it look like Rose was crying.
Yeah, well, that statue does that though, doesn't it? That's where the water comes from on that statue, I think. Because that's the Rose's.
Oh, right.
That's the Rose's tears statue. That's the statue they go to when, I think that's the episode where Amethyst's gem gets cracked, and they go for Rose's tears because they're supposed to come out of that statue, and they find it's all dried up. And then they go looking to find where the block is so that water can come through it so they can get Amethyst healed. And in the end, I think Steven ends up healing Amethyst with his magic spit.
Okay, I couldn't remember that. I thought it was the defrosting.
Because there's a really heartbreaking bit in that episode where the water comes through and it floods, and Steven's under the water, and he opens his eyes and he can see the shape of his mum above him, and he like swims up excitedly, but it's the statue. Like, it's a really heartbreaking moment in that episode. I love that episode. It's a good one. But
not
I found
heartbreaking enough for me to remember.
Evidently not. Well, we're 150 episodes in. You're not going to remember everything. I barely do, and I don't, there's loads I don't remember, and like, what am I, like this third, fourth viewing of this all? So, I think it was really interesting that despite being mad at Rose, Sapphire chose to go to a shrine to Rose. Like, she wanted to look her in the eye. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what she wanted to do in that moment. Yes, I did use eye singular. She's only got one eye, guys. Just saying. She wanted to be looked in the eye, in the eyeball. I also thought that the little reference to Amethyst was really cool. When I don't know if you picked up on it. In the flashback?
Yeah, the fact that one of the courts hadn't come out yet.
Yeah, that was, I think, if memory serves, in the episode That Will Be All, when Amethyst talks about meeting the Famethyst, she says that I'm designated, and reads out her number, and the number matches, apparently. So that's
awesome.
It's definitely, it's not could be Amethyst. That is absolutely Amethyst.
I assumed it was Amethyst, and I assumed that the reason they gave the full name was because at some point
they'd clarified
the name.
You are correct.
Yeah.
You are correct to assume that, and I think that's really neat, because I think it would be a shame to tell this story and in no way include one of the three, main crystal gems, because it's so Pearl and so Garnet based. It really does feel a shame to be then like, oh yeah, then Amethyst was there, but of course she wasn't there. So it's like, instead you've got a sort of
a cute reference.
A cute reference is just to honour the fact that she's a big part of this story too. Maybe she's not as instrumental as Pearl was in terms of introducing Pink to Earth, or as Garnet was introducing Pink/Rose to the very concept of saving other gems too, but essential and important nonetheless. And I like that her story does also weirdly intersect with Rose's in that she was due to hatch the exact minute she was due to emerge the exact minute Rose stepped on the planet. Do you know what I mean? And that's really cool that their stories tied that a little bit that way. It was almost like she was waiting for Rose. Like, yeah, it's kind of cool. I like it.
That's, again, poetic.
Yeah, very much so. And then there's the final element of this we haven't talked about yet, is the sort of the cliffhanger, which is they finally convinced Sapphire that by telling her this story, that with context Rose still believed in the ideals she believed her in. There's just how she got there is a little bit more complicated. And when Sapphire is convinced of that, they go back and Ruby is gone and has left a note with which one of my favourite details of the whole episode, which is because Ruby doesn't think ahead the same way Sapphire does. Just writes the name too big and then has to put, so it's like Saph and then Aya is written. It's written.
Oh, we've all done that.
Because Ruby's so it got so little ability to think ahead that it started writing in the middle of the paper and didn't have enough room. Such a such a beautiful guy.
That bubble writing we all did as kids, like especially you were probably all right with Dan, but Christopher, fucking hell, it would always be like Krista and then Uffa. Did you
always overcommit on the C? Like the first letter was huge, and then you're like, shit, I got like quite a few more to fit in here.
No, I'd commit till about the T, and then I'd have to put the offer in smaller writing to make it fit. Yeah. No, I don't know where she's gone, but her and Amethyst have gone somewhere, and I'm looking forward to finding out.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, now you've seen the first episode with the setup for the bomb. What do we think the direction of the bomb is?
Next week is Sapphire. Next episode is Sapphire. Then maybe the next episode is Amethyst, and maybe we do that. Or I'd like to think it ends with Yellow and Blue getting in on the action. I'd like to think that, but I predict it's all going to be loosely linked by Garnet But then I like the notion as well that maybe it then goes back to Stephen too, and this sort of notion of who is the heart of the crystal gems. Is it Rose? Is it Stephen? Is it Garnet? Is it love? You know?
Is it all of them?
That's what I mean by love.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So do I quickly do some? There's not much, Trev. I'll spin through a couple if you want.
Rattle through the triv, Daniel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so this is the first time we've actually seen a gem emerging from a kindergarten. Despite the fact we've seen kindergartens multiple times, they've never visually shown a gem emerging for whatever reason. First time we've seen that. Look pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool touch.
On the map that Pearl projects, the point she touches for the prime kindergarten suggests that it is somewhere in the Great Lakes region of the US, probably somewhere near Ohio or Indiana. That's for the prime kindergarten. So you can sort of place it in real world America if you wish. Obviously, this is the first time we got a glimpse of rainbow quartz, which is the Pearl Rose fusion. Although interesting, is it rainbow? Can it? Okay, this is just occurred to me. Can it still be a rainbow quartz if one half of the fusion isn't a quartz at all? Rose was shapeshifting. Was shapeshifted. It was a diamond shapeshifting. She was still a diamond. That doesn't change it. So that we've always called that fusion rainbow quartz, but Rose won't.
Yeah,
Rose
you're right.
Really
It's rainbow diamond.
Just a thought. But that's the first time we saw them fuse, and obviously I like the idea that they fused, moments after. I also loved the detail. It's not in here, I don't think, but when Pearl is trying to fuse with Rose the first time in this, and she sort of gets under her and holds her up by her feet, like a cheerleader type pose. That's the pose the Rubies did in the answer to become the big Ruby. So I like the idea that she glimpsed Rubies doing it that way and thought that's how you fused.
So that's nice. Awesome. That's a very nice touch.
It's a nice visual touch. That's the impression I've taken from it. Someone get that added to the triv. I ain't bothering, but I think that's what that is. Let's see. Absolute confirmation that the human zoo was actually Blue Diamond's idea, not Pink's. Again, that makes me. We hinted at that notion 2 episodes ago, but actual confirmation of that, I think, is it was very much needed because the zoo was always an icky part of Pink's past. Obviously confirmation that Pink Diamond is the lowest ranked of the three diamonds we know of. It makes sense on a graphical level when we see that icon. The diamond symbol. The pink one is the lowest. The white one is the highest, and the other two are in the middle. So.
Makes sense.
This one's interesting. Pearl claims that she was given to Pink Diamond a few thousand years before Pink was given Earth. This means that since Pink Diamond began her colony on Earth 6,000 years before the beginning of the series, that means Pearl was given to her at least 9,000 or 10,000 years ago.
Pearl's looking good for her age, man.
She is. But I know you're still all about the cute blue one, as you call her.
I don't know. Cute blue one buggered off. Floating around space. Pearl's here. Pearl's been loyal for 9,000 years, Dan.
That's true. At least, yeah, it's true. Yeah. I'm on your side. Cartoon Network handed out a bingo sheet before they released these episodes with a bunch of things that were either going to happen or not going to happen, and we got to tick them off if they did. And one of them was flashback episode, and one of them was Pink Diamond backstory, which obviously you could tick off if you watched this episode.
That's cool.
I'm not going to tell you some of the stuff that's on it because it might potentially spoil things. I find the bingo sheet thing to be a really interesting idea, and I both don't know why they do it and love that they do it. They've done it twice now, I think, so it's pretty interesting. The episode's title is a reference to a lyric, obviously, from the 1983 hit song Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler, which is a great song.
Now we're only falling apart.
There you go.
Total Eclipse of the Heart.
Yeah, that's the one. Which I think, pretty cool. Any other thing? I just want to note as well that I really liked seeing Rose in the traditional get up that the quartz soldiers wear. The sort of with the two lines down from the middle, from the shoulders down to the center to an icon. I think that it was just really cool to see Rose in that costume.
Yeah, I thought that.
Let's see. Oh, in message received, Pearl claimed that not all the Pearls know each other, but especially when asked about Yellow Pearl. But this episode, of course, reveals that she's met both Yellow and Blue Pearl before. Although that joke in message received is more like a joke about racism, because she's like, oh, not all Pearls know each other. So it's kind of like, I don't know how literally we were supposed to take that line, but it's a nice little nod either way. And I think that is it, looking at it. That's the last of them. So there you go. That's the Triv.
Cool. That's the truth.
You excited for the next one?
Yeah, very, very. Another bumper ep for you guys. Not quite as bumper as the last episode, but still.
Yeah, 5-10 minutes longer. But I think this one was important because I think what happened was, and I'm not going to go into too much because we have a habit of, if we had a bingo card, one of the things you could tick off would be Dan and Chris overanalyze their own podcast, or particularly Dan analyzes the podcast. But I think it was always bound to happen that way, and I stand by it. I'm really proud of our discussion of Single Pale Rose, but I do think that the excitement of all the possibilities and all the things that changes do get in the way of really getting into the heart of the character choices. So it's such a gift that the show gave us this episode, so we could analyze the more sort of character-driven elements of that reveal. We got to fanboy out and get excited at all the continuity and all the interesting details and all the foreshadowing last week. Get all that fanboying out the way, and then this week we got this opportunity to reset and actually analyze it from a character perspective and the choices made. So it's really a gift that the show gave us this episode in terms of this podcast, because I feel like this episode and the one before it, not in terms of the show, but in terms of this podcast, have to go hand in hand. Really, to get
I think that's
to get
fair.
our full analysis of that reveal.
Although we did, it was a movie length edition. I think we did do enough analysis, but yeah, I see your point.
No, yeah, we just didn't get into the normal level.
Yeah,
of
I see what you said.
Motivation discussion that we tend to do on this podcast.
Yeah, I see what you said.
We were very practical and like talking about all that. This could mean this and this could mean that, and that's exactly the discussion that happens when you watch Single Pale Rose. I stand by it as an honest reaction to that episode, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But what I'm saying is, it's really nice that we got this then after it to fill in that little thing that we were kind of missing last week. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah.
Cool.
There it is. So yeah, that's everything for this week. Come back. I say this week, this episode, this is a bomb. So come back tomorrow for more is what I should be saying. So that's everything for today. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll speak to you tomorrow as we discuss What's Your Problem?
You're my problem.